ready for a deep dive into a hidden history of ideas. Today we're heading into the captivating world of French philosophy, and our guide for this adventure, none other than Michel Serres, who will be drawing insights from his work in praise of philosophy in the French language.
Oh, you're in for a treat with this one. See, what makes this deep dive so unique is Serres takes us beyond those usual stories about philosophical schools and rivalries.
Right.
It's less about, who said what, and more about uncovering that unique spirit, that essence of French thought.
Okay, I love that. So instead of getting bogged down in, say, empiricism versus idealism, what kind of picture does Serres paint?
He shows how so many French philosophers, they resisted being boxed into those neat categories. They were more like intellectual explorers, blazing their own trails.
Study that.
Often drawing inspiration from this really wide range of sources. Think of it as a vibrant tapestry of thought woven with threads from all these different disciplines, different experiences.
Intriguing. Now, Serres also dives into this super intriguing concept, translatio imperii studii. Basically the transfer of empire and knowledge.
Yeah.
He argues there's this fascinating link between, the dominance of a language and intellectual dominance.
Mm-hmm.
How does that play out in the story of French philosophy?
It's such a fascinating point. Serres, he uses the example of how Greek, it gave way to Latin as the language of scholars, and then later Latin giving way to other European languages.
Right.
And he highlights that these shifts, they were never simple handoffs, never. They involved power struggles, voices being silenced. Even, the erasure of certain intellectual traditions, French philosophy, it often existed in the shadow of these dominant languages. It had to carve out its own space, forge its own distinctive voice.
So it's like this hidden current of thought that we're only now starting to really appreciate.
Exactly. Imagine, this group of thinkers, they're grappling with these really profound questions, right? Not just about the world, but about the very nature of knowledge itself.
Oh, wow.
And they're doing it within this very specific cultural and linguistic context,
right.
One that often pushed them to innovate, to challenge the conventional wisdom of the time.
This is already giving me a whole new lens to view philosophy through. But Serres doesn't just lay this out in some dry academic way, does he? How does he bring these ideas to life?
He's a master at weaving together history, philosophy, and vivid imagery.
I love that.
One of the most compelling examples is how he contrasts Descartes and Rousseau's approaches to knowledge.
Okay.
He does this using this metaphor of explorers navigating a forest.
Ooh, I love a good metaphor. Paint that picture for me. How does Serres depict Descartes?
He portrays Descartes as this confident explorer. He's striding through the forest, determined to chart this clear, methodical path to knowledge.
Okay.
Think straight lines, cutting through the undergrowth, illuminating everything with this bright light of reason.
Okay. And Rousseau, what's his journey like?
Rousseau, now he takes a more meandering path. He's drawn to the hidden groves, the unexpected turns. He values direct experience, observation, really immersing himself in the forest's rich complexity.
So it's almost like Descartes is trying to impose order on the forest, while Rousseau is surrendering to its inherent, chaos.
That's a great way to put it. Serres uses this contrast to illustrate two fundamentally different ways of understanding the world and the nature of knowledge itself.
Fascinating.
He seeks clear universal principles.
Right.
While Rousseau, he finds value in the messy, the intricate details of experience.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about these philosophical giants. But Serres doesn't stop there, does he? Where else does he take us on this journey through French thought?
He guides us through some really pivotal moments in intellectual history. He shows how this interplay, this dance between methodical clarity and embracing complexity, it continues to resonate in the work of later thinkers.
Okay.
One particularly fascinating turn is his exploration of chaos theory.
Chaos theory. Now we're talking. But that seems like a jump ahead. How does that fit into a discussion about French philosophy from centuries past?
Well, Serres, he highlights how in the early 20th century, French mathematicians like Hadamard and Poincaré, they were already wrestling with concepts that would later, form the bedrock of chaos theory.
Yeah.
These mathematicians, working within that French rationalist tradition, they began uncovering the limitations of trying to explain the universe with purely deterministic models.
So they were saying that even with the most meticulous calculations, there's always an element of unpredictability.
Exactly. They were exploring ideas like sensitivity to initial conditions, where a seemingly insignificant event like, say, a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could cascade into enormous unforeseen consequences, like a hurricane in Florida.
Okay, that's a powerful image. But how does this connect back to philosophy?
Serres sees a parallel between those mathematical discoveries and the limits of grand narratives in trying to understand human history and knowledge. Just as a purely deterministic model can't fully account for the universe's intricacies, rigid philosophical systems often struggle to capture the nuances of human experience, the role of chance and change.
So, are you saying we need to move beyond these grand systems and embrace a messy, more process-oriented way of thinking?
Exactly. Serres makes this distinction between what he calls declarative and procedural approaches to knowledge.
Okay.
The declarative mode relies on grand narratives, universal laws, sweeping pronouncements.
Right.
The procedural, however, emphasizes step-by-step processes, local knowledge, the importance of individual experience.
It's like the difference between stating a grand theory and actually rolling up your sleeves and figuring out how to build something step by step.
That's a great way to put it. And Serres sees this emphasis on the how, the procedural, as a recurring thread in French thought, going all the way back to the contrast between Descartes and Leibniz.
Descartes again. So he represents the declarative approach.
Yes, with his quest for clear universal principles. But Leibniz, while also a brilliant mathematician and logician, was captivated by the intricate workings of things.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Think mechanisms, processes, the nitty-gritty of how change happens.
It's fascinating how Serres weaves these seemingly abstract philosophical debates into a larger story about how we make sense of the world. So how does this distinction between the declarative and the procedural manifest in the broader context of French philosophy?
You're picking up on a really crucial point here. It's like French philosophy, with its procedural leanings, kind of anticipated this shift we're seeing in the modern world.
Oh, interesting.
A move away from those grand narratives and towards a focus on the intricate processes that shape, how we understand things.
Okay, I'm hooked. Give me an example. What's a good example of this procedural approach in action, something that, clicks with our modern world?
Well, think about computer science for a second. Instead of relying on these abstract theories of computation, what do computer scientists do? They create algorithms, those step-by-step instructions that power everything. I mean, from your phone to, self-driving cars.
Right.
It's a procedural approach, and it's completely reshaped our reality.
That's a perfect illustration, and it makes you realize how much of our world now operates on this procedural logic,
Right.
Engineering, medicine, even how we understand these complex systems. It's all about breaking things down into these processes.
Precisely. And what Serres argues is that this shift, it has huge implications for, how we approach knowledge itself.
Okay.
It's not enough to just declare these grand truths.
Right.
We need to understand the mechanisms, the step-by-step unfolding, the how.
The how.
That often gets overlooked when we're, so focused on those big picture answers.
So it's less about knowing it all and more about how did we get there, like the journey becoming as significant as the destination.
That's a great way to frame it.
Yeah.
And Serres finds a prime example of this procedural thinking in Leibniz.
Right, we were circling back to him. Remind us how Leibniz fits into this procedural lineage.
Leibniz, he was this fascinating blend, a brilliant mathematician, obviously.
Right.
But also someone who was just obsessed with the practical mechanics of how things worked,
Yeah.
He was enthralled by machines, the intricate workings of clocks, pumps, you name it. He saw a similar kind of precision in the universe itself.
So instead of searching for some overarching, metaphysical principle, he was digging into the nuts and bolts of how reality operates.
Exactly. He developed this elaborate system of thought, with monads, these fundamental units, right?
Right, yeah.
And their intricate interactions, he believed they formed the very fabric of existence. His was a philosophy that really emphasized process, interaction, a kind of dynamism that, it really foreshadows how we understand these complex systems today.
He sounds like a true forerunner of how we think about interconnectedness these days. The world not as these, isolated objects, but as this web of relationships and processes.
That's spot on. And Serres, he sees this emphasis on process and interconnectedness as a defining characteristic of French thought.
Right.
It sets it apart from those traditions that lean more heavily on, abstract principles or individual subjectivity.
It's fascinating how a national philosophical tradition can have these underlying tendencies, almost like a personality,
Yeah.
It makes me want to go back and re-examine other philosophers through this new lens.
That's the beauty of Serres' work. It opens up these new avenues of inquiry and encourages us to make those unexpected connections. And speaking of connections, he takes this exploration of the procedural in a fascinating direction.
Okay.
When he talks about the resurgence of interest in the landscape.
Okay, landscape again, it's such a rich term. But we were just talking about algorithms and processes. How does the idea of a landscape fit into all of this?
Well, Serres uses landscape to describe a kind of shift in focus.
Okay.
From the universal to the particular.
Okay.
From these abstract theories to lived experience. From those grand narratives, right.
That we've been discussing, to the textures and the nuances that actually make up the world around us.
So it's like instead of trying to impose order and these categories, we're taking a step back and we're appreciating the intricate details, the uniqueness of each element within that landscape.
Precisely. He sees this resurgence of interest in the landscape not as a rejection of knowledge or reason, but as a way to re-enchant our experience of the world.
I like that.
To really value the specific and the local.
It's like choosing to get lost in the details of a painting. You know, instead of just reading the title and moving on, you begin to appreciate the brush strokes, the play of light and shadow, all those subtle choices that the artist made to create the whole.
Exactly. And Serres links this shift in perspective to a much broader cultural movement that's, gaining traction even as we speak.
Okay, I'm curious. What's driving this renewed fascination with the landscape, this appreciation for the particular? Well, think about the growing environmental awareness that we're seeing, the understanding that we're part of this delicate web of life.
Right.
There's a heightened sensitivity to the places we inhabit, the ecosystems that sustain us, and this all pushes us to move beyond those global generalizations and recognize the importance of local knowledge,
right?
The particularities of different environments.
It's like that old saying, think global, act local.
Yeah.
But it's more than just a slogan now. It's recognizing that true understanding comes from a deep engagement with the specifics of our world.
Precisely. And Serres, he sees this focus on the landscape as a crucial counterforce to the homogenizing effects of globalization. That tendency to view the world as this kind of flat, undifferentiated space. He's urging us to remember that the richness of human experience, it lies in the diversity of places, of cultures, of perspectives, the very opposite of a, one-size-fits-all approach.
It's like he's providing a roadmap for navigating the complexities of our interconnected world. Instead of being overwhelmed by the sheer scale of things, we can find meaning and connection by zooming in, by valuing the uniqueness of each element within that larger tapestry.
That's a powerful way to put it. And this appreciation for the landscape, for the local and the specific, it leads Serres to some truly profound reflections on the nature of universality.
Okay, we've been talking about embracing diversity and complexity.
Okay.
But how does Serres reconcile this with the pursuit of universal truths, those overarching values that connect us all?
He suggests that true universality, it doesn't come from imposing a single dominant worldview.
Okay.
Or language, for that matter. It comes from a respectful engagement with the multiplicity of perspectives, the many ways of knowing.
That's a bold statement. So instead of seeking a one-size-fits-all answer, he's suggesting a more pluralistic approach, like a conversation that honors the richness of human experience.
Exactly. He believes that engaging with this diversity, with the multitude of voices and experiences, that's what will lead us to a far richer and more inclusive understanding of the world.
I'm starting to see how this all circles back to his point about, translatio imperi et studi, that transfer of power and knowledge. He's not rejecting the pursuit of shared understanding, but challenging us to find it in a way that doesn't erase or diminish the richness and complexity of human experience.
You've hit the nail on the head, and this brings us to another fascinating aspect of Serres' thought. His insights into the relationship between language and thought.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already, but language is a whole other landscape.
Yeah.
How does Serres approach this connection between the way we think and the languages we speak?
Well, you see, Serres argues that our very ways of thinking, they're deeply entwined, with the very languages we speak, the words we use, the grammar that structures our sentences, even the metaphors we employ. It all shapes how we perceive and interpret reality. He suggests there's a kind of hidden philosophical wisdom sort of embedded within languages themselves.
That's a fascinating idea.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the content of what we say, but the very tools we use to express those thoughts. It's like the language we speak kind of creates a framework through which we view the world.
Exactly. And Serres, he sees this as especially important for, for philosophy, a field that relies so heavily on precise language and rigorous argumentation. He suggests that, that by paying closer attention to the nuances of different languages,
right,
especially those outside those dominant philosophical traditions, we can gain a much richer and more nuanced understanding of the very questions that philosophy is trying to answer.
It's like realizing that the map is not the territory,
Right.
Each language kind of offers a different kind of map, with its own unique way of representing the complexities of the world.
That's a brilliant analogy. And Serres, he takes this even further. He argues that the incredible diversity of languages, far from being an obstacle to understanding, it can actually enhance, our comprehension of the universe.
Wow.
He sees a parallel between the multiplicity of languages and the intricate, interconnected nature of reality itself.
So instead of trying to force everything into this single universal language, he's suggesting that we can gain a deeper understanding of the world by embracing this linguistic richness. It's like each language offers a different perspective, right? A different way of illuminating all the facets of this complex jewel.
Precisely. And it's a powerful argument for celebrating and preserving linguistic diversity, especially in the face of, globalization and the dominance of certain languages. Serres reminds us that language, it isn't just a tool for communication. It's a way of seeing, a way of knowing, a way of being in the world. To lose a language, then it's like losing a unique perspective on reality itself.
It's like we've been exploring this vast, intricate web of ideas, right? And language itself is another thread, connecting all these different strands of thought. It makes you realize how much is often lost in translation, how important it is to engage with different voices in their original tongues.
You're exactly right. And that brings us back to Serres' central mission, right? To champion the unique contributions of French language philosophy. He's not just arguing for French thought out of some, sense of national pride or anything like that. No. He genuinely believes that it offers this treasure trove of insights that have been overlooked or even marginalized, due to the dominance of other philosophical traditions.
Okay. After this deep dive, I can definitely see why he's so passionate about this. He's not just giving us a history lesson or something.
Right.
He's making a case for why these ideas, these thinkers, these ways of seeing the world are still so relevant. Why they're still so vital for understanding, our present moment.
Precisely. He wants us to see that French philosophy, it offers not just a different set of answers, but a different way of asking the questions in the first place. Yeah. It encourages this way of thinking that's both rigorous, but also imaginative. It's grounded in the specifics of experience while also being, attuned to the interconnectedness of things.
This whole deep dive has been like opening a window onto this hidden landscape of ideas.
Yeah.
One that I'm now eager to explore further. Yeah. What are some of the key takeaways that you hope our listeners will carry with them from this journey through Serres' work?
I think the most important takeaway is really just that invitation, to think differently.
Yeah.
To challenge our assumptions about what we think philosophy is, where we might find it. Serres, he encourages us to embrace curiosity.
Right.
To seek out those unexpected connections, to find philosophical inspiration, not just in dusty tomes, but in the landscapes that we inhabit.
Right.
The languages we speak, the intricate processes that shape our world.
That's beautifully put. And it speaks to the power of this deep dive format. It's not just about summarizing a book. It's about opening up this space for exploration.
Right.
For asking new questions, for seeing familiar things with fresh eyes.
Exactly. And that's what makes Serres such an inspiring guide. He doesn't offer these easy answers. He invites us to join him on this journey of discovery, reminding us that the most important destination is often, the journey itself.
On that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the world of French philosophy. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling energized. I'm feeling inspired and ready to continue exploring these ideas.
And I have a feeling this is just the beginning of your adventure,
Yeah. There's a whole universe of thought waiting to be discovered within within the pages of French philosophy, and I have a feeling you've only just begun to scratch the surface.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this fascinating exploration. Remember, keep those minds open, keep those curiosities piqued, and never, ever underestimate the power of a new idea. Till next time, happy exploring.